to call this meeting to order. This is the February 14th, 2019 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Chris Jordan, and I'm the chairman of this commission. I would like to remind all the commission members and those in the audience, if they would, please silence all of your electronic devices. And for the commission members, I would like to remind you to turn on your microphones when speaking and speaking into the microphones, as well as those in the audience to come forth and speak into the microphone when it's your turn. We will start with introductions. Are we going to have a council liaison tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we're out without a council liaison tonight, so we will start.
Michelle Mahoney.
Mike Lester.
Jack Deacon.
Penny Quigg. Ann Strotman, city staff.
Dale Vaughn.
Hank Vogt.
Chris Yarnell.
Blake Marcus.
David Bangy.
And Eric Barron, planning manager.
Ian Zollinger, city staff.
Sonny Sanders, director of planning and protective services.
Ryan Molman, city councilor.
Shane Wade, city staff.
Thank you. The city code authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of a regular member. A quorum of 5 members or alternates is necessary to conduct business. This evening we do have 2 members, regular members, absent, Bunny Tricky Cotton as well as Dean Dutoy. Is there any members on the commission this evening that will be disqualifying themselves from any agenda item? Okay, I'm seeing none. The voting members this evening will be Jack Deacon, Michael Lester, Michelle Mahoney, Blake Marcus, Dale Vaughn, Chris Yarnell, Hank Vogt, and Penny Quigg. Next, we'll have a call for cases. If there is someone here to represent this case, if you would just raise your hand. Our first case is case number P19004, 3261 South 10 Mile Drive. That is a special exception permit. Is there someone here? Thank you. Second case is case number P19005, 2059 Hastings Road. Again, that is a special exception permit. Is there someone here? Thank you. The next case is case number P19006. It's a zoning text amendment for telecommunication facilities. I believe that will be city staff.
That's correct.
I think, Ryan, you will be presenting that, correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next case is case number P19007, the 2500 block of Mission Drive. That is a preliminary and final subdivision plat of Capital City High School subdivision. Thank you, sir. And lastly, case number P19008, 1200 West Stadium Boulevard. That is a final subdivision plat of Ridgecrest subdivision, section 2. Again, thank you, sir. Have we received any requests for continuance?
No.
Okay. I would like to reorder the agenda this evening with the blessing of the commission. It's always been my philosophy that I would like to do business of the constituents of the community first, and any city issues or cleanup we do last. With that, I would request from the commission's approval that we move the case number P19006, the zoning text amendment, to the last thing on our agenda. So with that being said, I guess we need to first see if the commission has a problem with that. I'm seeing none there. And then before we adopt the agenda, I need to have the order of testimony from you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the commission. The proceedings of the meeting are being recorded, so please step forward to the microphone when you speak and give your name and address for the record. The standard order for each case is as follows. After the introduction of the request by city staff, the applicant or their consultants will provide information on the request. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes unless additional time is granted by the commission. The applicant shall have 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. Testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each unless additional time is granted by the Commission. City staff will then make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, references to printed material including staff reports and applicable findings shall not be read into the record unless directed by the Commission. The Commission will close testimony from the floor. The Commission will then discuss the proposal, then publicly make its determination with reasons. The form of the motion shall be positive. That is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will be taken with ayes in favor, nays opposed. The chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, the Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, staff reports, minutes of proceedings, correspondence or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, rules of procedure for the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. These items are public record and available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. Please be advised that any items that are presented, distributed, or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, petitions, and letters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Next, we'll move on to the adoption of agenda. If someone would entertain that motion to reorder the agenda.
I move to reorder the agenda and adopt the agenda, moving item for case number P19006 to the end of new business items.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 8-0. Ms. Hand has provided us the minutes for our regular meeting from the January 10th meeting. When the Commission has had a chance to review those, we will entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt the minutes as submitted.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carries again 8-0. Communications received. We do have some communication this evening. I believe city staff has provided that to all of the commission members. We have some communication regarding case number P19005, as well as some communication regarding case number P19006. That's all correct?
Yes.
Thank you. If you look over that briefly, and then we'll get started. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and get started with our new business. First item tonight is case number P19004, 3261 South 10 Mile Drive. It is a special exception permit. Ian, if you would, tell us a little bit about it. We're grabbing a mouse real quick. Give us a second.
Excuse me, sorry. This is the only screen that is working at the moment. I would like to briefly go over the history of short-term rental ordinance for information purposes. The ordinance was passed by the City Council on January 2nd, 2018. The purpose was to address the growing trend of short-term rentals and establish it as a special exception use that would require a special exception permit, and to define specific use standards to make sure that all short-term rentals are meeting and addressing common concerns. Among those specific use standards, these are these are the ones that are outlined in the city code, which is found in Chapter 35 and Section 3541B 35. The special exception permits for short-term rentals are issued to the property owner. They do not stay with the property, meaning that the property is sold. Then the new property owners cannot operate a short-term rental on that property. They would have to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to be able to operate a short-term rental. The use of accessory structures as rentals are not permitted. It goes over the number of guests that are permitted, the signage that is permitted. It also prohibits parties and receptions. There are parking requirements. Residences must maintain their residential appearance, and they're subject to building and fire code requirements, as well as applicable taxes and licensing requirements. I just wanted to go over that, so you had just that. Make sure to have that information when considering short-term rental. The case number P19-004, 3261 South 10 Mile Drive, is located here. Just a couple hundred feet away from the intersection of Country Club and South 10 Mile. Here we have the zoning map of the property. The property is zoned RS1, as well as C2 and a small portion over here. And RS1 is a single-family zoning. And here is an air photo of the property outlining the property, with the residence here and a driveway here, as well as here. The property owner is requesting a special exception permit to operate a short-term rental of the entire home, as well as a short-term rental of the of a lodging room or rental space. I would like to note that those would not be able to happen at the same time, that you can't rent out the entire home and also rent out different rooms at the same time, but rather when applying for a short-term rental of the entire home and a short-term rental of the lodging room or rental space, it gives the applicant flexibility in if they are away for some time that they can rent out their entire house, or while they're there, if they have those that they wish to rent to, they can do that at this as well. The property has the ability to meet the specific use standards found in the zoning code. There are no plans for a sign, but if the applicant chooses, they are permitted to have one sign, 1 by 1 foot. The property has sufficient parking, space for parking, and the applicant is here to answer any questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Ian. Shane, is there anything on the engineering side regarding this case?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do any commission members have any questions for Ian or Shane regarding this case? Okay, seeing none. Just so everyone in the audience understands how the testimony works, as Ian stated originally, each applicant is given up to 10 minutes to discuss their project. Then we will take testimony from those in the audience. What we do is we typically go with those that are in favor of the request. We go with those that are opposed, and then we go with anyone who would like to speak. The testimony from the audience for those three categories is typically limited to 3 minutes. Once that is done, there is a rebuttal time for the applicant only, unless this commission decides that there is a reason for testimony or rebuttal from those in the audience. So I will keep track of time and try to warn the applicant and or anyone testifying regarding their time constraints if it gets to be a problem. So with that being said, at the time anyone comes up, we'd like for you to come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and then you're welcome to start your testimony. At this point, we will ask for the applicant to come forward and give us a little bit of history on what they're wanting.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me here tonight. My name is Mike Rhinell. I live at 3261 South 10 Mile Drive, and I'm here requesting a special exception permit to operate a short-term rental. This property, we bought the house in 2005, renovated it over several years actually. Lived next door in a small duplex we own while we renovated it, and now it's just my wife and I living in the property. We have a 5-bedroom, 4-bath house, and it's just us, so there is plenty of extra room in the house, except for holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. We filled it up then. We have family from all over the country. At any rate, the house is well suited for a short-term rental. We're off the street. There's no on-street parking involved. It's going to maintain, obviously, its appearance as a residential house, is what it is. And we really plan on having no parties and like that, except for personal, which happens. I can answer any questions the committee may have, if you have any.
Thank you, sir. Do any of the commission members have any questions for the applicant?
So you would still continue to live there,
Yes, yes,
But-
my wife and I live there.
but also, and he said this, the two can't happen at the same time, but also potentially having the whole house leased up, rented out.
No.
or-
Obviously not while we live there, but
So you will be there the whole time that they,
yes,
or that you do the Airbnb.
Right.
Or short-term rental.
sure.
Okay.
I don't foresee us renting the entire house, but who knows? You know, down the road, we may go on a vacation or something, but that would be a rare occurrence. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
thank you.
Okay, well, next we'll move on to, we will ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Lastly, I will ask, is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. At this time, I will close public testimony. Ian, if you would, provide us with a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The property appears to meet the review criteria for special exception permit, and the staff recommends approval of the proposed special exception permit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Is there any questions for Ian or other city staff from the commission members? Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the request for special exception permit for short-term rental.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries 8-0. Ian, this will be forwarded to the city council, correct?
Yes, the city council is the final decision maker on this case, and that will be March 18th, which I believe is Monday, at 6 p.m. here in these chambers. And it is a public hearing as well.
March 18th, 6 p.m., this room.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming this evening. Next, we will move on to our next case. It is case number P19005, 2059 Hastings Road. Again, this is a special exception permit. Ian, if you would, tell us a little bit about this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out the location of the property. It is here in the Covington Gardens subdivision off of Hastings, right here. The property is zoned RS3, single family residential. Here's an air photo of the property, and you have Hastings here and Newcastle Lane here. The property has two frontages. Much of what, excuse me. The property owner is requesting a special exception permit for short-term rental of the entire home, as well as the short-term rental of a rental space or lodging room, much like the last application. The property has the ability to meet the specific use standards found in the zoning code, and there are no plans for a sign, but they would be permitted for a 1 by 1 foot sign. The property also has the ability to meet the parking requirement. They have a garage and driveway here that can meet the 2-space requirement for vehicles of those coming to stay in the short-term rental. I'd be happy to answer any questions as well. The applicant is here as well to present, and they can answer any questions.
Thank you, Ian. I will ask again, Shane, on this case, does engineering have anything?
I do not.
Thank you. Do any commission members have any questions for city staff? Okay. Again, I'd like for someone to come forward and present this case. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Danny Bryant. I live at 2059 Hastings Road, Jefferson City, Missouri. My wife and I are requesting a special exemption permit for a short-term rental. We bought our house December 2018, and so far I've enjoyed getting to know our neighbors, the house we've just bought. So late in December, Judy, my wife, came to me and asked what would I think about a short-term rental, Airbnb. And we have a finished basement that it's got a bedroom, full bath, a little kitchenette area. It's also got like a living area. It could be fairly isolated. So early on in our relationship, we'd stayed at quite a few bed and breakfasts, and we've enjoyed it. Enjoy getting to know different people, as well as we've often thought we would potentially like to run one ourselves. So this kind of falls in line with that, but not quite as dedicated as a true bed and breakfast. Several things that appealed to us about it. It provides us an avenue to get to know different people from all over. It could provide a little bit of an extra income. And now we're empty nesters. Our youngest daughter's in college, and Judy would enjoy maintaining, booking, marketing the space. Before we applied for this exemption, we did a lot of research. Judy called the zoning board and talked to Ian, and talked to her through that. He explained the application, the letters that would be sent out to the different neighbors, and knowing that there's going to be a fee involved, we took it upon ourselves to send out a letter to the addresses that Ian provided for us, letting the neighbors and people surrounding that would receive the letter, letting them know what we were trying to do. We sent a letter out, I believe it was January the 3rd. On the 10th, the last zoning meeting, we came to witness what would happen, what we'd need to do here. After we visited the last zoning board, we went ahead and applied for our application on the 11th. When the sign went up in the neighborhood for the hearing tonight, we watched several comments being placed on the Nextdoor app that we're part of, that our neighborhood participates in. So Judy put on there and asking anyone concerned, any questions, to contact us. We gave, well, in our letter we gave her contact information. But on the app we asked them to come by, stop by. Somebody's usually there. Ask questions so we could explain what it was we were trying to do. Some of the concerns that we've heard, and just to kind of address a few up front, will this bring crime into our neighborhood? Well, you can even look on that Nextdoor app. There's comments made about most recently some kids running through the neighborhood with paintball guns shooting houses. A couple of months back, I'm not sure the date, but there were break-ins in cars and things like that. So crime is already there. Typically, I wouldn't believe that someone would come into a neighborhood and rent a space and then set out to do any kind of damage or crime in the neighborhood where they're staying at. Will it bring down property values? So far, I've not been able to find any evidence that it does. In fact, you have to maintain your property or nobody was going to want to stay there. Will it be a problem with people bringing pets? Several were concerned that people walking their dogs would go to the bathroom in their yards and things like that. We have a fenced-in backyard. More so than that, initially at least, we're not going to allow pets. Maybe in the future, small pets, but again, we have the fenced-in backyard. Will it bring more noise? I go to bed every night about 8:30 to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. We're not going to allow them to be staying up late, making a lot of noise till all hours of the night. And right now, even now, we have neighbors a couple of houses up that have a karaoke party, usually sometime during the weekend, but it's 10:30 or so sometimes, and we can still, inside our house, hear the music thumping and carrying on. Will they be throwing parties? We're going to have a no alcohol policy in our house. If with the times that we're going to dictate as quiet times, no alcohol, if they're looking to party, they really need to go look somewhere else. We're proud of our home. We plan on keeping our property up, maintaining the house and yard, and in some cases make improvements. We're not going to do anything that would devalue our home, property, or in turn the neighborhood. The neighborhood does not have a covenant. This does not have an HOA. We're respectable, responsible, professional people, and we intend on conducting our Airbnb in the same manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the commission members have any questions for the applicant at this point? Yes, sir.
Are you planning on staying there while the downstairs is rented?
Absolutely.
At any time, do you
No.
plan? Okay, thank you.
I have a question just out of curiosity. I haven't done any research on looking at prices, but what kind of price point do you think that you'll be in as far as a per night?
There's a calculator through Airbnb, which I don't know if we'll use it or not. We were thinking probably 75, 80. We'll probably reach out and do a little bit more investigation on it. That's what we're thinking, at least right now.
Any other questions for the applicant from the commission at this point? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We will move on to those who would like to speak in favor of this request. If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name's Nick Swoboda. I'm here with my wife, Ashley. We live at 2053 Hastings, so we're right next door to the residence in question. My wife and I have used Airbnb and other short-term rentals in the past. I travel a lot with my work. They usually offer a little bit more affordable rates, and we've always had great experiences. So basically, we just wanted to come here tonight and say that we support the program. We support it in our neighborhood. And one, we wanted to say that, and two, we just wanted to see if, and make sure that if you had any questions for us, since we do live right next door, we could address those. So that's really all I have to say, pending your questions for us.
Thank you. Is there any questions at this point from the commission members? Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward. Okay, I'm seeing none. Next, we will ask, is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. So, one of you gentlemen like to come forward?
Mr. Chairman, Council, I'm Dr. Gregory Ween. I live in Hastings as well, 2112 Hastings. I guess I'm at 186 feet away from them. I didn't get a letter. But anyway, I have some concerns just being a resident in Covington Gardens for almost 10 years now. Just the fact that a establishment like this might come in very close to me. I know Ian mentioned the good things and that the processes might be pretty good as far as what they know. But, you know, in terms of parking, for instance, they have a straight driveway. They can't park behind their vehicles, so they're going to be on the street. There's no way that's going to change, even though I know the parking said was capable of holding more cars. Yeah, it's long, but you can't park behind the people in the garage, so that wouldn't work. We have a lot of small kids in the area. I don't know what kind of people will be coming in the B&B. I'm against having it in our neighborhood, in a neighborhood that has 300, 400 houses, all single family. Then all of a sudden now we have extra people that don't have any connection to it. So basically that's my feeling toward it. Any questions? Or?
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward? Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Council, for time. I live at 2043 Newcastle. I've lived for 10 years. I, too, have a concern.
Do me a favor.
People bought their homes. I'm sorry.
State your name, sir.
I'm Gary Barnhart.
All right, Gary, thank you.
I've lived there for 10 years. The people in this neighborhood have bought their homes under the context of being a single-family zoning. I don't think we should be allowing this type of zoning in the neighborhood. I agree with the doctor. The other problem is there are some concerns with the property values. I've talked to a real estate company. They do expect an impact on the homes. We should not have to lose our value of the homes because somebody else is going to make a dollar. No offense, but we do have that concern. Also, the parking. If you're going down the streets, Newcastle is even more narrow than that of Hastings. And when they have parking on either one of those streets, especially on Hastings on either side, two-way traffic cannot pass now. It's even worse on Newcastle. You get one line of parking, you can't get up and down the street. And again, he said, it is a straight driveway, they're going to be parking on the street. Now, my other concern is, I've heard of this being tossed around as a short-term rental or a B&B. If it's a B&B, my understanding, they can rent out 2 rooms, not just 1, under the short-term rental. Now, also, they can rent out to any number of people who are related, which means you can have an unlimited number of people. So what, they're going to bring in a whole lot of people, 20 people, 10 people in that rental? I see a problem. And there's nobody's going to be doing enforcement. Who's going to be overseeing this if that does happen? It's not there. So you've got potential problems. Same thing as you got multiple rooms for rental. Now I know it says for the short-term rentals, 1 room. What's going to stop them from doing other rooms? Nobody's going to be there doing oversight. Who's going to look at it? Nobody. So, as the paper said, there are a lot of people using these, but there's already zoning areas that accommodate this type of endeavor. There's hotels, there's other Airbnbs. This is a residential neighborhood. It's not a business neighborhood. And our position is it shouldn't be allowed. So, So in short, I see that they have put out the staffing planning report. So with that, we do disagree. We think there is going to be some kind of injury to the property and the loss of property values if this does happen, especially if they're going to have a lot of people in the rooms. Also with the parking and the traffic, we think there's going to be an issue. So also maybe some potential crime, because somebody could come in, stay in the room, look at the neighborhood, leave, come back sometime later, and guess what? Your house is at risk. So are the kids. So that's pretty much what I have to say, and I appreciate your time this evening. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Is there any questions from the commission members? Thank you, sir, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to come forward? I think he was next, sir. We'll let him go first.
I'm Bruce Chin, live at 2124 Hastings Road. We bought our home while we moved in, started moving in the 15th of August last year. And we found and have found Covington Gardens to be a great neighborhood to live in. People get out, walk, they wave when they go by, they talk to each other. And it's really an idyllic place to live. Denny and Judy's house is, in my opinion, the nicest house in the whole subdivision. If that house had been sold before we bought the one that we did, I'd have bought their house. I don't like it so much. But I do have concerns. And I'm not going to list them in any certain order, but all equally concerning. Number one, there's no vetting process of who they rent to. We have no idea the background of these people. They could be pedophiles, child molesters. You don't know. And like this gentleman noted, the subdivision is full of small children. School buses stop and load children in the morning. They stop and load children in the afternoon. The school buses are all over that neighborhood. And they stated that they were only interested in renting out the basement. Well, if this permit is approved, it allows them to rent the whole house. So what they say they may or may not do now could change in the future, and the whole house could be rented. We don't know. And then I was reading through some of these items on the staff analysis, and the two on the bottom right jump out at me. Short-term rental use is generally low impact and would not be expected to have a major impact on the surrounding properties. Well, you say would not be expected. That tells me you don't know. And then the next one below that says short-term rental use is generally low impact and would not be expected to have a major impact on surrounding properties. Well, again, not to be expected. You don't know what effect they're going to have. And on the other side, it says something about here, the use of property as a short-term rental so not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the community, which I'm talking, I'm looking at it as from the subdivision point of view. Like I mentioned earlier, you don't know who these people are that are rented, what their background are, if they have criminal histories. There was an article written by Martha Kleindienst in the Sunday, February 2nd News Tribune, and she stated issues that she's found out about involving short-term rentals. In fact, there's one in the Callaway Hills Elementary School where she lives that's up for approval. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if I could, I'd like to step forward and give it to you, and you people can look at it if you haven't seen it already.
You'd start it there. We'll pass it around, sir.
Those are my concerns. My wife and I are both retired. We thought we moved into an idyllic neighborhood, and for the most part, it really has been. Greg now have become fast friends since I moved in, and along with other neighbors, and I'm very uneasy about the consequences. I've played this thing as devil advocate for the last several weeks. Ask myself, what good does this bring to our neighborhood? I can't think of a single thing. I can only think of negative things, and I ask that it not be approved.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions from commission members?
And my residence is across the street from Danny and Judy's house, and then back south this way about 4 houses, so I'm fairly close to them.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Sir, if you'd like to come forward, please state your name and address for the record.
Jonathan Carpenter, 4054 Newcastle Lane. So I'm just right down the street from the residents in question as well. I agree with all the concerns that have been voiced here tonight. I just wanted to add a couple of extra that haven't been mentioned. One particular short-term rental may not cause that much negative impact in the neighborhood, but once you get one, then you get another, and then you get another, and next thing you know, maybe you will have some security issues or overcrowding, too many vehicles, so forth and so on. And there's really only one, well, there is only one road that comes in or goes out of the subdivision. There's several hundred homes there, so adding more traffic is just going to compound that situation. So that's really all I wanted to add. Thanks for your time.
Is there any questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Again, I'll ask, is there anyone in opposition? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Carolyn Strobel. I live at 4026 Newcastle Lane. I just have a couple of concerns. The parking, I don't know, they said about parking in their driveway. They can do that. But because of where Newcastle comes out with Hastings, you cannot see, if they park on the corner, you cannot see onto Hastings to pull out to see if there's somebody coming. And trust me, there are lots of kids riding their bicycles out in the street all the time. And where Hastings comes down the hill, you cannot see them. If they're coming over that knoll on the other side of Hastings, they come down there, you cannot see them. And if they're coming around that corner and there's cars parked there, you can't see them. So I'm concerned about, if there's cars in the street and they can't park in their driveway. That's what concerns me. And then another thing, who they rent to, how are you going to check them out? With all the kids in the area, you don't know what they're going to be renting to.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. Is there any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Okay. Let me check, see what we got. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, again, I'll ask, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Yep.
Speaking on the microphone. Thank you. I'm actually, my name is Christian Oros, and me and my wife, Sladana Oros, right next to me there, where I sat, we live at and own at 4070 Newcastle Lane. I'm just going to kind of read what I already sent in the email as comments, because they make a lot of sense as far as me and my wife are concerned. I'm just going to point at the address that we at, 4070 Newcastle Lane. It's to the right, the next house right there. We are very much opposed to the proposal for three main reasons. Covington Gardens is a dense residential subdivision with dozens of young children, as you heard being mentioned before. Over the years, all our neighbors have gotten to know each other, and our children play outside and walk to each other's homes all the time. Now, we have a 5-year-old, and I'm sure he's going to make a lot of friends, and we can invite him over, and we have a very big backyard, as you could see there. We could play a lot of sports there. Okay, so yeah, as far as the children point, yeah, we're going to have a lot of possibly children over, which we had before. Some of the children line up for the school bus. There's one school bus, particularly at the corner of the property we're talking about. So every day the bus stops there, we see children standing there waiting for the bus right in front of the property. We purchased our home because we wanted to live in this kind of neighborhood, especially that we just found out that after 20 years we had a child. We couldn't have children. After 20 years he happily appeared in our lives, and we're very happy. Our backyard is very large, and I already mentioned that. The entryway for the proposed lodging is right next to the play area, and the windows at the basement, the finished basement, look out in that direction. Our deck is right there, and that's where we kind of sit and have barbecue and play with our son, and then we have kids over. The idea that complete strangers could possibly repeatedly come and go so close to this play area is of concern to us. It is said and known that for short-term rentals apps such as Airbnb, there are reviews from the guests or even hosts, but they're not really required. I don't think they're 100% reliable as far as the reviews to screen renters. And then the other point that was made earlier, you can really check criminal records and background checks on people. So, you know, if anything, personally, I think even the owners of this property might have to be concerned for their own safety, since it's in their own house. The second point, we are concerned about our own privacy. As I mentioned, the basement view is out towards our deck, so we have barbecues there and play with our child and his friends and other neighbors' friends. Our privacy will be kind of eliminated or almost eliminated. It's one thing to have some neighbors over, and another just complete strangers in and out, hearing what we're saying, looking at us while we're there, trying to enjoy our deck. Because we are so close to the lodging area, the proposal will have a direct negative impact to us personally, and that's what we think. Others who live farther away, do not have young children, possibly don't have young children, will not likely be impacted as much as we would. We care about this commercial intrusion and will mean a very unfair change in our lives. We purchased the home because of its residential value, and especially when we had our son, we were very happy and lived for the past 5 years there, over 5 years. And now he's going to start school, and this kind of took a little bit toll on us because we were busy trying to choose schools for our 5-year-old. And the last point I'll make, the property values could be affected, but Yes, also for us personally, if, for example, we think to choose a different school district for our son, and we obviously have to move and sell, and buyers potentially might have an issue with the short-term rental, then obviously we might not be able to sell the house as quickly as we would otherwise.
I'm going to ask that you wrap it up. I've given you more than 3 minutes, so
Yes.
I'll give you a
Yep.
couple more seconds, but please wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. And other than that, this kind of short-term rental will probably make more sense in an area where the houses are more spread apart. We are so close to this area. It's like 5 to 20 feet away from the view from the basement in the back. And thank you for consideration of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll ask from the audience again, is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none. Would you like to come up and speak? Please do. Yes. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Ladana Oros, and I live at 47. Sorry. My name is Ladana Oros, and I live at 4070 Newcastle Lane, right there. I can't read off of my notes. I'll just go off of what I feel. We purchased our home because we love that backyard. We love that backyard because we envisioned our child in it, playing and having friends over, which we often do anyways now. You can put a zip tie across the house because they're always together. They're all young and basically are growing up together. This is very hard for me because I feel like I'm the mom of the neighborhood. I take care of the kids. As a daycare provider that I was for 11 years, I vowed to keep my son safe. If I ever had a child, and any child that I've met before I had my son, and now that I have one, I would like for him to enjoy that backyard and for us to enjoy it as a family and not have to worry about someone, a potential predator. This is very hard because it's just very hard being very close to them. I love our property, but I love my son more. I love the kids of the neighborhood. This is a subdivision I seen over 16 years ago and said it, God willing, I have a family. That's where I'd want to be. Not to mention the bus stop that me and my son have waved to all those kids standing at the bus stop. That is a great concern to me. Great concern. As they don't have a choice, their parents leave them at that bus stop. I don't want to have to worry about them. because they are our neighbors. This is very hard for me because I want the neighborhood to be a one, but not divided. But safety is my main concern. And the children, when I was getting ready, I could hear them outside playing and running on such a nice day. I can't imagine when spring and summer come. I respect our neighbors. They are empty nesters, and I understand that. My parents are also. That's why this is very hard for me, because they would be denied. If they were to be denied, it would be hard for me, because I am like the mom and I take care of everyone. This is the only way that I know how to be, and to make sure that the children are safe, and to make sure that no harm comes to anyone.
I'm going to ask you to wrap it up, okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time and your consideration. I will always continue to be the voice of children and the voice for my son. I want only the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Once again, I will ask, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak in opposition to this request? I'm seeing none at this time. Next, we'll move on to, is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you.
And lastly, I'll ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record, sir.
Frank Underwood, 220 Partridge Lane, Holt Summit. My wife and myself has known Miss Earls for several years. She's come out to the bus lot for her child to see the buses and run. I didn't plan on speaking to this evening, but I did see that she is, and so I'm just here as support for her and her feelings. Seeing her over there sobbing during this whole process is very heart-wrenching for me, and I respect the way that she feels for her children. I think that we all would too for our own children, and I just would like to speak in support of her feelings and her husband's feelings as well. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions? Thank you, sir. Again, I will ask, is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak on this request? Okay, I'm seeing none. City staff, obviously we know that the applicant would like to have rebuttal. Would you like to do your staff report first and address any of these concerns, or would you like for the applicant to come up?
They can come up and speak.
Okay. At this point, we'll give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission. I believe, if I'm correct, we can give you 3 minutes. Very good?
Very good.
Just name and address for the record, please.
Danny Bryant, 2059 Hastings Road, Jefferson City. Just a couple of things, and some of the things I couldn't hear, but a couple that I did. The parking issue, yes, we do have a 2-car garage. Our plans when we have guests is typically my wife would park in the garage. I would park behind her, which leaves possibly one side of the garage. I do have a motorcycle, but even But that there, they could park right outside the garage. If they have visitors, we still have some space, but I believe the limit that they can bring in to visit is 5. As far as, I know that there's a big concern on the type of people we're bringing in. We can't check the backgrounds thoroughly. That's true. However, we can't check the background of people driving through the neighborhood. We can't check the background, or I'm sure a background check, a thorough background check, was not done on the several full-time rental properties that are in that area. Mention about the whole house being rented out. We are not renting out the whole house. We're only renting out the space in the basement. And we will be there all the time. We have no intention of leaving our home to people we don't know.
Okay. Anything else, sir?
That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions from the commission members for the applicant?
Is there a homeowners association that your house belongs to? Are there any covenants and restrictions against any types of rentals?
You said you had a fence in the backyard?
Yes.
Is that a chain link?
It is chain link. We have considered, as they said, their backyard is right there. We are considering possibly putting in like a short privacy panel, maybe a couple sections down, just outside, so people, if they go outside, we do have a little patio there. If they go outside, then, they're not looking, right over there or being disturbed either.
Any other questions for the applicant from the commission members? Thank you, sir. At this point, I will close public testimony. Ian, I will ask that you give your staff report and if there's anything you would like to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a couple items that I would like to address as far as parking and traffic. Parking is permitted on the road currently, and there's no limit on the number of vehicles for a special exception permit that people can bring. There's a requirement for the amount of spaces that the property would have to provide, and that is 2 spaces where on-street parking is permitted and 3 where on-street parking is not permitted. Parking on the street actually slows cars down, and so traffic would alleviate some of that of what was talked about. As far as oversight, I put in the staff report, special exception permits may be revoked. That's never happened before as far as I know. But a permit can be revoked for non-compliance with any conditions imposed on the special exception use, for violations of any provisions in this section of the zoning ordinance pertaining to the use of property, the construction or use of buildings, structures, activities conducted on the premises, for violations of any adopted ordinances, regulations, resolutions, or ordinances of the city, county, state, or federal law agencies. So there is a process and way to revoke a special exception permit, and those complaints that would be taken by those who already address property maintenance issues, and that is how that would be overseen. Staff recommends the property appears to meet the review criteria for special exception permit, and staff recommends approval of the proposed special exception permit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Ian or other city staff at this point?
I have one, and it's just if you could please refresh at least my memory.
Isn't there something in there about number of people that can stay? Don't we have something set up on that? I was thinking there was something in there.
The section on short-term rental states for the rental of an existing family residence and lodging room there's two different numbers for a residence, and then there's a number for the residence and there's a number for the lodging room. So it states that a maximum of 5 unrelated persons or any number of persons related by blood, marriage, or adoption shall be permitted as lodging guests for the entire residence. And then the section of code states that a maximum of 1 rental space may rent to guests. A maximum of 4 people shall be permitted as guests. So they will only be able to have 4 people at maximum as guests for a lodging room, and is what they stated they intend to do.
Any other questions from commission members? I do have a question myself. Ian, correct me if what you proposed from their application was the opportunity to operate this rental either as a whole home or by the room. I think the applicant tonight has said that they don't want to do the whole home. I believe they said they wanted to do just by the room, with them having to occupy the property at the same time. Is that something that should be addressed as a part of our motion this evening, or does that muddy the water as far as how this permit is issued?
What the applicant stated, I believe, I don't want to speak for them, is what they intend to do, and it's something that the commission may do if they choose.
I'll expand on that. Is this on? The applicant could withdraw the part of it if they have no intention of doing that, the part on the whole room. The commission could approve one and not approve the other, or could approve both. So there's several options there.
Okay. So with that being said, we have closed public testimony. I believe from my perspective, City Councilor can tell me if I'm wrong, but if we would ask the applicant to come up and clarify their intentions, since I think we have a little bit of conflicting information.
Yeah, that's the prerogative of the chair.
Okay.
Can't reopen the public hearing, but you can ask for further clarification.
Okay. Once again, I'll try to be as impartial as I can as chairman. I've obviously told the commission members where I believe we have two different things, so I would ask one of the commissioners to request that if they would like.
I would like to ask the applicant if they would be willing to accept that modification.
If you don't mind, come up and put that in the microphone again. Name and address for the record, just so it's all on recorded, please.
Yes, it's Danny Bryant at 2059 Hastings Road. Yes, we are not planning on renting the whole house, just the basement space.
Okay.
If we filled out the application incorrectly, I apologize.
Okay. And so, if I may ask this one question, the city code, the zoning code, has those two different options, a lodging room or a house. And so your application has been received for both of those, and you're withdrawing the part that would be a rental of the entire residence, leaving only a short-term rental of a lodging space within your residence. And is limited to a single space or room in your case. It would meet those requirements. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So the applicant has withdrawn the rental of the entire home, just for clarification. Thank you. With that being said, is there any other Sir, we've closed public testimony, so I can't take anything from the audience. With that being said, I will ask the commission members if there's any other questions for city staff or clarification.
I've got one. So, in our other cases that don't involve short-term rentals, the procedure is normally where we either approve or deny, and then no matter what we choose, it still goes up to the city council. Can you refresh my memory if that's still the case here?
Yes, that's correct. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body, and their recommendation goes before the city council in a public hearing, much like the format here tonight, where people will have the opportunity to speak and testify in front of the city council, who is the final decision maker.
And if we recommend something with a caveat that we include in this that's not necessarily in the form motion provided, the city council could be presented with a different version or approve something that's not our recommendation, right?
Yes.
Any other questions or concerns from council or from commission members to city staff? Okay. At this point, I will entertain a motion. I do believe the motion needs to be made in a favorable way. I also believe that we should state that it has been amended, and I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the request for special exception permit for short-term rental of a single lodging space.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, sir.
I have a few things to say before we vote. First of all, I've been on record, I am a big favor of the Airbnb short-term rental. I think it's a godsend, especially for our older neighborhoods. That being said, the concerns about traffic, if you're going to have teenagers in your neighborhood, you're going to have traffic. If your house becomes a rental house, you're going to have a house full of people staring in your backyard no matter what. The only way to control it is to put up a big fence or buy all the property around you. Bad people that come in and rob your houses, either going to go in the drug houses for the money of the drugs, or the multi-million-dollar mansions. They don't go out to those neighborhoods unless they got somebody they don't like. The rental houses would be a horror story in the neighborhoods, especially month to month. You don't know what's going to come in there. That being said, I personally don't feel this neighborhood is ready for short-term rentals. The one thing that swayed me was the gentleman saying the domino effect, because this is not an older neighborhood. The short-term rental has been a godsend for the older neighborhoods, to keep the renters out there, to keep the people start keeping them up, and then maybe they start being revitalized. The extant neighborhoods, young and vital, I don't like to see it encroaching in there. I think maybe when it starts to become more renters, like it does way across the street over there with the bad section of the West End, then maybe we could fix it up that way. But I'm going to have to vote no on this one.
Okay.
I guess I would just add that as far as the domino effect is concerned, if we approve one, I mean, that's not a domino effect. If there's a second one that wants to come in that we think all of a sudden it's transforming the neighborhood, we'd have the opportunity to deny them in the future. So I think there's a remedy for that. And on top of that, I think if you have a lot of concerned citizens who are prepared to monitor the neighborhood, watch what's going on. If we let these people in, and if something goes wrong and they don't abide by all of the terms, there are plenty of people here prepared to go try and get their license revoked. I think it's self-enforcing. So that's why I'd be agree that this should be approved.
One more comment. Ma'am, you worry about the pedophiles. They're out there. I'll guarantee you there's at least one or two watching those kids every day. You're not going to keep them out of your neighborhood. You're not going to keep them out of your city. They're there. They're living right amongst you. You got young kids that are bent that way. So just if this goes to a short-term rental, kids aren't going to be any more safe.
Any other comments from the commission members? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Okay. Staff wants to do a roll call, please.
Jack Deacon?
No.
Michael Lester?
Aye.
Michelle Mahoney?
Aye.
Blake Marcus? Aye. Dale Vaughn?
Aye.
Chris Yarnell?
Aye.
Hank Vogt?
Aye.
Penny Quigg?
Aye.
and that passes 7-1.
Again, the motion carries 7-1. It will be forwarded to the city council. City staff, again, when will that be forwarded?
It'll be March 18th, which is Monday at 6 p.m. here in these chambers.
March 18th at 6 p.m. Again, for those that were here this evening, that is a public hearing. You're welcome to come and testify again to the city council. Ultimately, they'll make the decision. Thank you all for coming this evening.
I don't think you should close the floor to comments from the audience until after city staff have made their recommendations and stated their opinion. Now, Ian stated that having cars parked along the slip street will slow down vehicles. Well, it may, but it will also block the vision of children running into traffic.
Okay. I appreciate your comment, and I'll discuss it with city staff. Thank you, sir. Okay, if we can clear out the chambers, we're going to go ahead and continue on with our meeting, please. Okay, we will move on to our next case this evening. We are going to, as we stated in the adoption agenda, move case P19006 to the end. Sorry to do that to city staff, but appreciate their understanding. We will move on to case number P19007, the 2500 block of Mission Drive. It is a preliminary and final plat of Capital City High School. Ian, if you would, tell us a little bit about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to point out the location of the property in question. We have Highway 179 here to the west. The property is to the east. Creek Trail Drive here to the north of the property. Mission Drive to the south of the property. The property is zoned, has several different zonings. It is RS2 single family, residential RA1 multifamily, C1 commercial. The property received a conditional use permit back in December 2017 to build the high school. Here we have the airflow of the property. Much of what typically goes into a preliminary and final plat as far as improvements, grading, sanitary sewer, stormwater has been reviewed through the normal site plan review process through a development agreement between the City of Jefferson and Jefferson City Public Schools. Here is the preliminary and final plat. It looks just a little bit different from the more recent subdivision plats that we've seen, mainly because it's larger. There are a couple of things that I'd like to point out. The total size of the subdivision is 110.26 acres. There are 2 lots and a reserve tract. So here is Lot 1, where the high school will be located, and Lot 2 is located here on the other side of the newly created street, which is to be Cavalier Drive, with Cavaliers is the mascot of the new high school. Lot 2 will be left for future development. Like I said, there will be a new street connecting Mission Drive here and Creek Trail here to the north. Right-of-way will be provided here to Cathedral Rock Drive, which is part of a neighboring subdivision that has not yet been constructed and will be constructed when that develops. Sidewalks will be located on the west side of Cavalier Drive as part of the development agreement. Sidewalks will not be required on the east side of Cavalier Drive, except for sidewalk connecting this sidewalk here at Notting Hill to the sidewalk along Cavalier Drive. Utilities are shown with access to water lines, sanitary sewer, electric lines, and telephone lines and gas, and I'll let Shane go over those. And the notable lot is, one of the notable lots is Reserve Tract A, which is here. That goes along the east side of Cavalier Drive and encompasses the property between the existing subdivision and the newly created street. And that is to be designated as an easement to the city of Jefferson for sanitary sewer, storm, water, and sidewalk. Like I said before, other items typically associated with a preliminary plat, including stormwater, sanitary sewer, street layout, sidewalks, and utilities, have been reviewed and approved through the site plan development process. The applicant's consultant is here to answer any questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ian. Before we get to any questions from the commissioners from you, I'd like to ask Shane or Engineering Department if they have any comments.
This time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there any questions from the commission members for city staff? Ian, I have probably one question and one comment. One is I'd like you to readdress the sidewalks along Cavalier Drive. Is there sidewalks on that roadway?
There will be sidewalks from Creek Trail down to Mission on the west side of Cavalier Drive. The only sidewalk that will be on the east side of Cavalier Drive will be sidewalk connecting to Notting Hill Drive here.
Okay. Very good. My comment will be, in full disclosure, as a property owner on Portobello and Notting Hill Drive, that it really concerns me that we're developing a new high school, 100 acres, and you have a road network coming into Creek Trail Drive that ultimately dumps in at West Edgewood, and there is no intersection besides a stop sign. Like a lot of constituents that we have come testify before us regarding traffic in their neighborhoods or new developments and all that, I just would like to make that known that that is a bad intersection, and I am very concerned about the young age of people driving, trying to use that intersection. So I'm sure it's on your radar, but once again, I think the forethought should have been maybe before we did this rather than later, because we're going to have some accidents.
And certainly, I agree the timing could perhaps have been better. The city has done a traffic study along the corridor, Edgewood Drive, and then there was also a subsequent traffic study that was done in relationship to the development of the school itself. Ultimately, the traffic study that was done along Edgewood basically has made the recommendation that there be a series of roundabouts built, one of them at Stadium Drive, one of them at the intersection with Creek Trail, and then a roundabout at the future extension of the road that comes down past Sam's Club, Stone Ridge. It wasn't included within the current sales tax to construct those roundabouts. However, as the high school continues to develop, conversations have begun to pick up in that regard. So we'll have to see how that fares in the next sales tax cycle, but it would have to wait at least until then for the money to be available, unless the council did something outside of the capital improvement sales tax.
Just curious, did they count the number of cars that come out of the high school every day and put that into their equation, or are they just the normal traffic?
Right. When they did the traffic study for the school, they anticipated that about 30% of the traffic from the school would be leaving or coming through Creek Trail Drive. And so I think the total number of students anticipated at the school is something in the neighborhood of 1,500. Some of them would be riding the bus, some of them would be driving their own cars, but about 30% of them that would have their own cars were anticipated to go that way. And so certainly, probably the only a saving grace perhaps is that the school dismissal time doesn't necessarily correspond with other peak times, but certainly the additional traffic is not going to, help the situation. I think they did. Part of the study, indicated, the queue times and queue lengths of cars at that intersection, and during the peak times, PM peak, would anticipate a queue of about 200 feet trying to make a left from Creek Trail Drive onto Edgewood, which is why we did take the step of removing the parking on Creek Trail so that we could at least have a longer left-hand turn pocket at that intersection.
That's really close to the stoplight down there with Stadium. That's going to be a mess. It really is. That's a mess now. Oh, and, okay.
And if I may show as well, I did not show you this slide here. It's a little bit easier to see the layout of the high school and how the parking lots will connect to Cavalier Drive here, as well as to the roundabout on Mission here.
My personal opinion, the site plan does more damage to the argument than it does because the parking lots are on Cavalier Drive. And we all know we take the straightest lane, the easiest way out. So I'm just reiterating to city staff, I know it's, it is being addressed. Once again, though, if you take 1,500 vehicles, students, which how many of them are driving and how many is not, my math's not the best, but I did it. 1,500 students, 30%, that's 450 vehicles, potentially hitting West Edgewood. It is going to be a mess. We are where we're at with it, with the development of the school and all that. We do have a councilman here tonight, so I'm sure, he's gotten his ear with that already, but enough being said, we're here for the subdivision plat. Do any other commission members have any comments or concerns about the subdivision plat? Okay, we will bring forth the consultant. If you would, please come and state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Paul Sampson, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. Also here today in the front row of the gallery is Mr. Frank Underwood with the Public School District, and he is the Director of Facilities. If we get into any questions detailing anything that he'd like to respond to, he is available. As Ian said, the purpose of the subdivision, really the nuts and bolts of it, are to dedicate the right-of-way for Cavalier Drive and other miscellaneous easements for infrastructure that has really already been constructed as part of the new Capital City High School. Ian, would you flip back to the site plan? It makes it just a little bit clearer to see what's going on here. So like I said, the main part is Cavalier Drive, connection from Creek Trail to the existing roundabout at the end of Mission Drive, and then the right-of-way, future right-of-way connection over to Cathedral Rock Drive. One clarification I would make to what Ian said regarding Cavalier Drive is the connection between the end of the adjacent subdivision and the stub that has been constructed on Cavalier Drive will not be necessarily constructed along with the subdivision. There's a little bit of a gap there between what this developer is responsible for and what the school was responsible for. So if and when that gets connected, the main purpose for the school district was to reserve the right-of-way corridor through that area. Let's see. The Cavalier Drive and the connection there, it was constructed as part of the overall development with the high school, but it was funded through the half-cent sales tax through the city and county, and the school district would like to thank the city and the county for the participation in the project, and helping add to the value of the project and getting access to the site. In addition to the street right-of-ways, as Ian said, the sidewalk connection from the end of Notting Hill over to Cavalier Drive, and then there will be a pedestrian crossway mid-block leading to the front of the school. That sidewalk has been constructed already, and the subdivision plat will dedicate easements for that. We'll also be dedicating easements for stormwater, sanitary sewer, and other utilities that serve the new building. This is the final legislative hurdle that the school district has to go through prior to the school being open. Construction is still on schedule to at least have part of the building finished this summer, being turned over to the school district for occupancy and first student when school starts next August. Let's see. A little more on sidewalks. Ian mentioned the sidewalks along the west side of Cavalier Drive. In addition to that, the school will also be constructing sidewalks along the entire length of Creek Trail Drive and also along the entire length of Mission Drive. So those sidewalks will be in place and being constructed as part of their site development process. I think David took care of all my comments on the traffic study. That was done. Again, the school did do a traffic study. If you look at the boundary area of the students that come to Capital City High School, it's predominantly west. The predominant corridor getting people from the west is going to be from 179. Personally, I really feel that, and I do agree with you, it's going to be worse than what it is today. I do feel like once people realize the difficulty that there is there, that people will start to avoid the area. So I think that may be a little bit of a mitigating circumstance there to maybe not make it as bad. And again, as David said, they have removed parking off of Creek Trail Drive to help accommodate a additional or a longer left turn lane. That is all that I have. Anybody's got any questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant?
Have you decided yet is the busing only going to go down Mission Drive?
The primary route for the buses, and Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, buses would circulate through and be pick up and drop off would be in the rear of the school, and then I guess they'd be coming in this direction, staging along the backside of the school. Then they will exit out, and again, predominantly they would be coming back out to Mission Drive again, as majority of them will be going west.
Any other questions from the commission members for the consultant? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Mr. Underwood, I think they mentioned that you were part of the application. Do you want to come up and speak at this time? You don't need to if you don't want to. Okay.
Just a little bit, just because I know there was
Yep, come up, name and address for the record, sir.
Frank Underwood, 220 Partridge Lane, Holt Summit, Missouri. I would agree. I know the traffic. I just want to reiterate a little bit on the traffic. It is a mess now. It's a mess down there now. Buses, they will go in and out the way that he had described, through the back and then back out Mission Drive. That's the safest way for a bus. Even the right-hand turn down on Edgewood is risky for a bus. They would occupy some of the left-hand turning lane as well as trying to turn right. So out that roundabout and back into the neighborhood heading east would be the easiest way for those students that are living over in that neighborhood. Out Mission Drive, out 179, and disperse at that point. That is the plan anyways forward. Down there, I guess one of the saving graces for that intersection is that when we open the school, it is only 9th and 10th graders the first year. So only a portion of your 10th graders would be driving in, but more and more of them will be driving as the year goes on. But when the school does open, it will only be 9th and 10th graders the first year, phasing in 9, 10, 11, and then 9 through 12 in the third year of the school. And that was all I just wanted to say about the traffic.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Underwood? Thank you for your testimony.
No problem.
We will move on and ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Please come forward. Seeing none. This time I will close public testimony. Ian, I will ask for a staff report from you, and then if there's anything from the engineering department as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The preliminary and final subdivision plat meets the requirements for subdivision plats as outlined within the subdivision code. Staff recommends approval of the plat documents, subject to correction of minor technical details identified by city staff.
Thank you, Ian. Shane, do you have a report for us?
Yes, and most of my report has been previously covered by Ian or Paul or David. I did want to add a couple of things that weren't covered, I believe, as far as there is a sidewalk, crosswalk proposed at the intersection of Cavalier Drive and Creek Trail to take pedestrians across the street over to the Greenway Trail that's across the street. There is associated with this as well a vacation request for a sewer easement that runs in and around Cavalier Drive that has been relocated over to the east toward the neighborhood, and then that would be replaced with a platted easement on that side, so we'll be vacating that as a part of this process as well. And then as part of the site plan, there was also, I believe also designed anyway, a greenway connection from following basically 179 corridor along the creek from Creek Trail Drive up to Mission Drive as well. And just wanted to mention that as well. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Ian. Does anyone have any questions for city staff?
On the Greenway Trail, so is there any plan to link from the campus down to the Greenway Trail on Stadium to the larger part of the Greenway Trail?
Yes, we're actually working with our Parks Department presently to connect what we're calling the last section of the reroute around the 179 Edgewood intersection. So if you're familiar with the area, we've worked over the last several years to build a greenway that kind of leaves the parking area there on Edgewood Drive below the Mexican restaurant around through Leon Beck's property and down underneath Highway 179, and then that comes out along Creek Trail Drive. And so basically, yeah, they're following the arrow. And so we're currently working on the last piece that would then take that back to Edgewood and tie into the rest of the trail. So essentially, you would have a loop that goes around the hill going up to Highway 179. And that's this, the sidewalk system at the school would then tie into that greenway system.
Any other questions from the commission members for city staff? Okay, we will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve the preliminary and final subdivision plat of Capital City High School, subject to the comments and technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries 8-0. Again, this will be forwarded to the City Council.
Yes, March 18th.
March 18th, again, 6 p.m. this room?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
It is not a public hearing.
It is not a public hearing. Okay. Very good. We will move on to our next case, case number P19008, 1200 West Stadium Boulevard. It is a final subdivision plat of Ridge Crest subdivision, Section 2. Ian, tell us a little bit about it, please.
Chris, just a preliminary matter, I apologize, I didn't notice something on this beforehand, but I do have to abstain from voting on this one. So.
Okay. That would be fine. If you don't mind, I'll ask you to go sit in the audience. And when we get done with this, we'll invite you back up. No, it's subdivision plat. Okay. Again, Mr. Marcus has excused himself for this case. I do believe we still have plenty of folks to proceed, so we will let Ian tell us a little bit about it.
And actually, I was going to take this one.
Okay, Eric,
And
please.
so, yeah, I'm trying to not get rusty on it.
Okay.
And so first, to orient you to the location of this request, up on the screen is a location map. So the property is highlighted there, located right there at the intersection of Edgewood Drive and West Stadium Boulevard. Literally, the high school we were just talking about is just there to the bottom left-hand part of the screen. So a growing segment, area of our community. As the property, particularly the property that's covered by this final subdivision plat proposal, is zoned to C2, General Commercial Zoning District. And so that's an aerial photo, current air photo of the property. It is part of the Ridgecrest subdivision. The Ridgecrest subdivision preliminary plat was approved in October of 2014. And so it laid out, and I actually have a picture of that right here, laid out and the orientation changed to actually have the subject property located, highlighted there on this plat. So Edgewood Boulevard is here to the left, and Stadium Boulevard right through here. And so this preliminary plat, which the Planning and Zoning Commission approved in 2014, laid out a number of residential lots through a network of streets located up here, and then also some commercial lots there along West Edgewood Drive. This is basically a continuation of the old Shepker's Farm subdivision, which was approved, and some of the history is laid out in the staff report dating back to the middle of the 2000-2005. And of course the property was largely graded out, at least some of the commercial side and some of the infrastructure put in place for that development, but it had failed. The development was never completed, and a lot of that commercial property is set there in a graded but unfinished state for a number of years. It was basically over a decade. But this proposal would be the second second section of this subdivision plat. The first section dealt with a number of residential lots located right up here. And so this section deals with only this lot. It's a single lot subdivision plat, and that is what it looks like. And so the approval of this plat would create that lot. There is one noteworthy thing, and that is that it would also create a reserve tract located right there, and there's some notes regarding that reserve tract. City staff are in the process of negotiating the terms of how that reserve tract would basically become right-of-way for future intersection improvements, some of which were discussed this evening at Edgewood and Stadium. So that process is still taking place between the law department and the applicant. It does, the terms of such are not necessarily an item for Planning and Zoning Commission review, but approval of the plat would create the reserve tract. You can, and I'll jump ahead just a little to the staff recommendation, basically that this plat does meet the requirements of the final subdivision plat, or of a final subdivision plat. Underneath the form of the motion, there's two recommended conditions. One of them is that this development agreement take place at some point, and then also the standard comments and technical corrections of the planning and engineering divisions. I believe all those comments have already been transmitted to them, have already been addressed on this drawing, and so I think that we're in a good spot. We just give it one final look over on the city staff side and make sure everything's okay before sending it on to the city council with signatures and approval. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and also the applicant and engineer here as well.
Okay. Thank you. Eric? Shane, engineering department, do you have anything on this?
Not yet at this time.
Okay. Is there any questions from the commission members of city staff at this point? Okay. If the applicant or their engineer would like to come up, name and address for the record, please.
Paul Sampson, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. The property in question is currently owned by Tweehouse Excavating Company. Mr. Ed Tweehouse is in the back row. If anybody has any specific questions to the property owner representing the excavation company, Tweehouse Excavation acquired the property. The total is about 78 acres of the Shepkers Farm development. That property was acquired in 2007 after the failure of that development, and as Eric said, since that time it's been sitting largely undeveloped. In 2014, as Eric said, there was a final plat, which was Ridgecrest Subdivision, Section 1. That was approximately 11 acres of the property, laid out as multifamily residential lots that was accessed off of Portobello Drive. At this time, none of those improvements have been constructed. They had kind of were going to use that as a fill-in job for slow times over the winter. Good for them, they haven't had any slow times. So as of this point, none of the improvements with the Section 1 part of the subdivision have been constructed. As Eric said, this proposal is for a 3.5 acre tract. It's being submitted as Ridgecrest Subdivision Section 2. There are no new streets proposed, but the reserve tract is shown on the, as it was in the preliminary plat, is shown on the final plat to be dedicated or transferred to the city as right-of-way through a development agreement with the future property owner. The property owner and the law department are working through the details of that. We've had meetings as early as the middle of this week, and that is all being shaken out, and we anticipate that will be in a final form and would follow the subdivision plat to the city council meeting in March, and all be approved at the same time. Really, the only other thing that's being done with the subdivision plat is dedication of a general utility easement along Edgewood and Stadium Drive. That would be used for extension of utilities to serve the 3.5 acre tract. As we get into the site development process with the future property owner, there will be other public infrastructure easements that would be dedicated, but because we really don't have a final site plan for the property at this time, we'll be working out the details of that through the normal site plan process. So those things will be worked through the city staff as we move forward. So that is the gist of it. I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Is there any questions for the consultant?
I have a question. Will the height of that site stay the same, or will it be brought down?
So right now, if you can envision it, it's basically if you were to drive out there now, some of the area along Stadium Drive, along Stadium, this area has already been leveled off, and there's a rock wall back here right now. Once you get to this location, that's basically where the excavation stopped during the Shepkers Farm development. So basically, along this right-of-way, that site will probably sit somewhere 8 to 10 feet above the intersection of the Stadium Edgewood intersection.
Because if I remember right, the entrances, there's several entrances off that off the stadium.
Correct.
That kind of go slope down to it. And then, okay.
Yep.
I was just
curious.
curious.
So one of those entrances is located right here.
Right there, yeah.
So and I don't remember if we actually wound up getting that on the. There's no access easement shown on there, but during the site plan process, there'll be a kind of a shared ingress-egress easement that will be taken care of there, and then the other access would be off of Edgewood Drive on that corner.
Be nice to see something go there.
Absolutely. As like Eric said, it's been sitting there for
A long
14
time.
years and nothing done to it, so.
Right, yeah.
And and Mr. Tweehouse will second that. We're hoping that getting one thing
Yeah,
here
it'll
going
kick off the
will
rest of it.
kick off the snowball to get some other things going along there, so.
Any other questions for the consultant? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Tweehouse, I believe your name was mentioned. Would you like to come up and say anything, or if you would, sir, name and address for the record?
I am Ed Tweehouse, Tweehouse Excavating, 4801 Wade Road, Jefferson City. I don't have any comments on this. I think staff and Paul has done a good job getting us to this point, but I will answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Tweehouse? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forward and speak on favor of this request? Seeing none. Is anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Please come forward. Seeing none. At this time, I will close public testimony. Eric, staff report, please.
Pretty simple recommendation for approval with the two conditions that I outlined earlier. The first being entrance into a development agreement that's already in negotiation, and then second, the comments and technical corrections of planning engineering divisions, which I believe are already met. We'll just give it another look over, and Shane might have a report as well.
Shane, please.
I believe most of the items that that I had in my report have been covered by either Paul or by Eric. I have no additional comments. I don't know if David may. At this point, we would be in concurrence with our planning staff recommendation as well.
Thank you, Shane. Is there any questions from the commissioners for any of the city staff? This time, we will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the final subdivision plat of Ridgecrest subdivision, Section 2, subject to the owner of the property owners entering into a development agreement with the city to dedicate Reserve Track B as right-of-way and to address comments and technical corrections of the Planning and Engineering Division.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? This motion carries 7-0. It will be forwarded to the City Council, I'm assuming March 18th,
That's correct.
6 p.m. in this room, while it is not
It
a
is
public
not.
hearing.
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you all for coming. For public record, we will say that Mr. Marcus is back at the table. We will move on to our last case this evening. Again, I appreciate city staff letting us adjust that agenda and keeping our city councilor here this late this evening. It is case number P19006. It is a zoning text amendment for a telecommunications facility and small wireless facilities. Mr. Molman.
Thank you. If the commission will remember, we spoke briefly about what are being called small wireless facilities back in last summer when we were talking about the National Historic Overlay District. And essentially, what we talked about then is the General Assembly in the 2018 session passed a bill that addressed what is being called small wireless facilities and a Uniform Deployment Act that governs how municipalities have to address, how they process and allow location of small wireless facilities within the city. So back in August, the commission recommended approval, and the city council approved the creation of a National Historic Overlay District. which was largely prompted by some of the things that were contained in the state legislation. Now we have before us the implementation of the entire state legislation. So if some of these things sound familiar, that is for a reason. So small wireless facilities are a new type of technology that cellular companies are deploying, which no longer rely on tall macro towers, the traditional cell towers that are 100, 200, 300 feet high and have really powerful antennas that propagate a signal over a large portion of a city. The new technology known as 5G relies on a much denser network of mini antennas that provide a signal that is higher in bandwidth and higher in speeds through use of a higher frequency, but the signal does not propagate nearly as much. So they're trading off speed and bandwidth with the higher frequency for less propagation. And also something that the higher frequency does is that it penetrates buildings. And so what that leads you to is a network that has to be designed with antennas that are pretty close together and at a height that is substantially less than what a traditional tower is. They want the antennas to be in the 35 to 60 feet range, so they are more close to the people that are using the antennas, a more direct communication between the phones and the antennas to accommodate this higher frequency signal. And so the state passed legislation and really didn't give cities a whole lot of leeway on how the city can permit and allow deployment of this technology in the city, mostly in the rights of way. And so the Missouri Municipal League worked with a interesting thing about that is that generally small cell facilities are not going on private property because they have to do a lot more of them in a denser network. The facilities are not frequently being deployed on private property because the amount of leases that have to go into deploying a network are much greater. Instead of one lease for a really tall tower, they now have to have 50 leases. So small cell facilities on private property is more than likely going to be a fairly rare occurrence. As I alluded to earlier, the main portion that we are going to see this affect the city are deployment of small cell facilities in the rights of way. And state law has required cities to allow, as of right, both co-location of wireless facilities in the rights of way on existing infrastructure, that's utility poles, street lights, traffic signals, things that are public property, public infrastructure in the rights of way that allow those antennas to go up in the air. And then it also allows new poles in the rights of way to then support the wireless facilities. So, typically a utility pole supports equipment that wires that are strung between the poles. These new poles will not do that. They will be poles 30 to 50 feet tall that all they're doing is supporting a wireless facility. And so that's going to probably be the largest impact that we are going to see is this addition of equipment to existing poles and then addition of new poles in the rights of way. The third thing that we have been able to take advantage of is in our historic district and in our single family district. If you recall, the state law carved out some protections for historic districts and single family districts, and basically says even when wireless facilities are being deployed as either large modifications of existing infrastructure or on new poles, even though they are in the right-of-way, they can be dealt with under the city's generally applicable zoning regulations. So what we have created is a generally applicable zoning regulation that takes modifications of poles and new poles to support these wireless facilities, and subjects them to a special exception permit. So that'll apply both on private property and on wireless facilities that are being deployed in the rights of way. And so the special exception permit, we've already seen two tonight. The process will be highly similar, where it comes before the P&Z for a recommendation, and ultimately goes on to the City Council for approval. That applies in our historic district and also in the single-family districts. And so the work that we did last summer to put the National Historic Overlay District in place is now being taken advantage of to carve out those protections and use those protections that were set forth in ordinance. So largely what we have here is dictated by state law, and so as such, staff is making a recommendation for approval, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions. I believe planning staff has some media for you guys to take a look at, so we can get a visual idea of kind of what the impacts are.
So I have a couple pictures. I literally just took these pictures off of the internet, and so some of them are some, might be common types of things that you might expect to see with a small cell deployment. Some of them might be fairly extreme. That's how you get a picture on the internet, is having an extreme example. But up here you can see an antenna array on the top of a telephone pole. It'll blow up of it to kind of see what it consists of. Here is, I think, one that's it looks like it was kind of incorporated into the design of the pole a little bit better. They can take the form of canisters. So there's really a wide variety of different ways of different styles of deploying these. They typically include some sort of utility box, either mounted on the pole below the bottom of the pole, or sometimes located underground. Here's an example of something that's actually on the side of a building, so not on a pole, but just mounted to the side of a building. And so here are some examples of those utility boxes. Now again, these are probably pretty extreme, with multiple boxes attached to a telephone pole there, and same here. This, I think, is probably the more common variety, but still not the most attractive thing in the world, but mounting the utility box to the pole. And so those are examples of different ways that they can be deployed. Now here are some examples that I found of how some design has been incorporated into these things. And so this is really what we're after when looking at the historic districts and in residential districts, particularly the downtown area and such. We really don't have a whole lot of ability. I don't think we'd as a city be interested in completely prohibiting or anything like this. These cellular facilities would be serving a very important public need, but we also want them to blend into the environment, and so incorporating them as light poles and such, with utilities probably underground or possibly in the base, and things like that. And so there are ways to camouflage these things. So that's really what we're hoping to direct the cell phone companies to do. This particular picture over here is a really good example. It was pulled, and I don't know what city it was from, but it has two examples here, one of before they had regulations in place and then one after. And so this pole here in the background is before they had regulations. You can see the array mounted at the top and the box located right there. And then sometime later they had a new pole installed that blended in a little better, so you still have that there, but there's no box. So a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. With that, I think we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions from the commission members for city staff?
Eric, but is there any cost difference between the ugly box and the one that's better looking? So why would they? My question is, why would they go with the ugly box if they have other options?
The pretty boxes are more expensive.
Are they?
Yeah, and so just from a materials and design and just making the thing is more expensive than just mounting the mounting the box onto a pole. It just is. And so what the intent of doing the special exception in the historic districts and in the single family is to, I won't say force, but to highly encourage them to deploy the more thoughtful designs in those areas. And then as technology improves and what the industry has said is as technology improves and times pass, the antennas and the boxes are going to get smaller. And so hopefully as good partners and patrons of a community, that they will seek to employ the least impactful technologies as they go along. But outside the special areas, there's not a whole lot we can do. The state law really restricts our ability to say, do it this way, don't do it this way. It's that we're really left with a pretty narrow scope of what we can force and dictate, and to the extent that we are left with that, we are taking advantage of it. But yeah, there's just not a whole lot that we're going to be able to do to actually dictate form, except in the historic districts and in the single family.
Jack has a question for you.
Did you have a chance to read the letter from the council to AT&T? They said their biggest concern was our standards were too ambiguous, and that the state specifically stated that they should be straightforward.
I was able to review those briefly. I got those fairly late in the afternoon. There is an accompanying FCC federal order that also deals with small cells. In my community, the legal community, they have to deal with these. Generally, cities are holding off implementing fully the FCC regulations. Those are being subject to litigation, and in large part, we do not think that those are going to get implemented at least fully as currently stated. And so most cities are taking an approach of holding off fully implementing the FCC, which is largely what they're talking about. Now, to the extent that they're addressing things that they think that we may have missed in state law, we're going to go over this thing with a fine-tooth comb and make sure we haven't missed anything, because like I said, state law is directory on this. It's mandatory. If we missed anything, we'll get it in there. But I think as it goes to state law, we're really, really close. And I think it's just going to be a couple of minor tweaks to address any of the current concerns that they have regarding state law. And on the federal law, which is what they're really addressing as to specificity, we're not at a point that it would be serving the public interest to just fully go in and adopt the things that are required under the federal order, while we believe those are still going to be subject to litigation. Now, if litigation comes out and those go into place, we'll probably come back and have another amendment. But at this time, we're not ready to take that dive.
So you're saying that what we're voting on is standards that requires in our historic districts and downtowns the more expensive designer, if you will, type.
Not that it requires it.
It's just ambiguous.
It's not that it requires it. It's that it comes through a public process. It comes in front of this body and goes in front of the city council to make sure that what they are proposing works for the public.
It's just like a PUD then. Each one, the design specific, and we're going to have to approve that, or?
Well, so I don't think it's going to be each one. It'll be here we have 50 sites, and we all want to make them look like this, as opposed to approving them on a pole-by-pole basis. That's not what we're going to do.
But is there a real concern? I'm not an attorney, and I wasn't going to wade through all that, especially without my glasses. Is there a real concern that they have that we're voting on something that they really don't know? Like they said, we'll vote on it, then figure out what it is?
I don't have any concern about this. It's one of those situations where you're going to be very hard pressed to come up with a standard that will work in every single instance. in every single location. I think that a system that allows flexibility is going to be best both for the city and for the carriers.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had really kind of the same question. I mean, from their comments and looking at the language, it really seemed unclear to me. I mean, when you show these examples, I mean, it's much more clear what you mean,
right,
by, character of the district, or, but just from your language, it really is unclear to me.
It's designed to be flexible, and sometimes flexibility is an expense of clarity, but like I said, I think that the flexibility is going to be better off for everyone involved. You're not going to be able to do a standard design that works in every situation.
Any other questions from the commission members? I do have a comment or a question. I don't know how other communities do it. My question or concern is, and tell me if I'm wrong, one is in the community of Jefferson, the traffic lights and things like that are owned by the city of Jefferson. So therefore, we would have the authority to authorize such antennas. The light poles that are in a large portion of our community, I'm not sure about downtown, but if you go into the subdivisions, are owned by Ameren UE. So how in Jack's subdivision or mine or anyone else's, how do you envision this working when the poles are owned by Ameren UE, and obviously they have the right to say what can or cannot go on them? So if they say no, then are you envisioning in a residential neighborhood that we are going to have to put up a separate pole for these antennas? Or has it been thought through?
It's a possibility. Now, federal law requires a certain amount of cooperation between utility companies and wireless companies to deploy this infrastructure, and that's really kind of outside our ability to dictate how they work together and what's going on. But if there were a situation where either Ameren says you can't go on this pole and that's just the way it's going to be, and federal law is not compelling us to allow you on this pole, and the cell company still says we need facilities in this particular area, yes, this will be a situation where there could be a new pole in a residential neighborhood, and under this code, it will have to go through a special exception permit, which will come before this body and get approved by the city council. And so those are the protections that are built into here to make sure that if in that situation that we are applying as much ability for the decision-making bodies to work with the companies to figure out a deployment infrastructure that won't detract from the residential character, or does so in a minimal way. But you are absolutely right. It is a giant problem that cities got left with in this legislation, that we cannot implement full protections for our residential neighborhoods. It's a huge problem. It's something that we fought very hard to address in the state code, and we got a little bit, but we didn't get everything that we wanted. So I completely agree. It's a giant problem, but it's a problem that kind of got dumped on us by the state legislature.
Was it ever addressed that, and once again, tell me if I'm wrong from my memory, but the current telecommunications ordinance for the big towers, in our local ordinance, if cell tower A comes in and builds the big one, cell tower B shows up and says, well, we want to be in that same area, there is a requirement that they have to cohabitate on that tower. Is there not an avenue in what we can do as a community with your help that would almost require, say, Ameren UE to allow them on their poles, their light poles, that we pay for? The city pays those light bills. So is there a way that we could put something in there that says, hey, Ameren UE, you are in our utility right-of-way easement. We're paying the light bill on those poles. We need these mini cell towers put up. We'd rather have somebody on an existing pole than put another one 2 feet away.
No, there's not. So that is a power that cities used to have, where you essentially forced facility owners to cooperate and co-locate in situations where that makes sense. The telecommunications industry convinced the General Assembly to take that power away from the city. We're really at the mercy of the wireless companies and the utilities to do the right thing. There's really nothing we can do. As it comes to network design, we're out of the game for most essential parts.
Okay, thank you.
I guess as far as the AT&T's red lines go, it looks to me like they're trying to exempt small wireless facilities from pretty big swaths of the code. Is that fair to say, or am I misreading that?
Like I said, I haven't been able to go through those with really in any type of detail. We're going to take a look and make sure that those are changes that are required by the state law as opposed to just things that they want. We are going to reserve as much power and as much authority to protect the city as is completely possible under the state law. That's going to be our goal, to get that in front of the city council.
Perfect. I would just say, so there's a lot of stuff in here that I think is pretty concerning from that respect, that I think goes against our intent of doing it. So.
With that said, that you're still going to look at this, is this something that we should act on, or should it wait till you're done looking at it?
Yeah, so another twist. State law requires that cities put these things in place within 2 months of being requested to do so by a wireless company. So when this went into effect on January 1, we got a letter on January 3rd from AT&T saying, please put a small wireless code in place. We have to do that within 2 months. We're not going to meet that. We're going to be closer in March. There is a time frame that we have to do this that has been imposed on us by AT&T. So the recommendation, while I'd like to take a lot of time and work out all these kinks, state law is not allowing us to do that. We need to move forward and get this on the books as is required by state law.
What's the consequence if you don't?
That's a great question. State law doesn't say so. Probably we would get sued, and a court would order us to deploy the small wireless facilities in a manner that's consistent with state law. We would probably be giving up the things that we are able to address individually in our code, like the historic districts. I would rather not be on the wrong side of that. It is a strong recommendation for approval.
But once again, if you get this in place and you find a major hiccup after it's been approved by the council or whatever, you'll be back before us to make that correction.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for city staff from the commission members? Okay, I believe we are ready to entertain a motion.
Yeah.
Oh, I do. I have to go through if there's anybody in the audience even. Well, I don't know. Maybe. Maybe our council member. Okay, to be in compliance, we will say, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this request? Seeing none. At this point, I will close public testimony. Again, I will ask commission members, is there any questions or comments for city staff? We will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the proposed zoning code amendments for small wireless facility antenna.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries 7-8. That's right, he's back. 8. We're back to 8-0. It will be forwarded to the city council, correct?
That is correct. Be forwarded to the city council with a public hearing on, what was that, March 18th, 6 p.m., Monday, this room.
And then again, this one will be a public hearing.
It will be a public hearing, yes.
Okay.
So,
Ryan, anything else from you, sir?
We haven't explored, but we may try to move this forward at the first meeting in March. We still need to explore that at a staff level with council members, but just FYI, we're looking on things that we can do to make sure that we're putting this in place correctly and within the necessary timelines.
Once again, though, that will be posted on the city's website for that public hearing, so that anyone that's concerned can watch the city's website for those dates and times.
It will be appropriately noticed to the public.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Other business, city staff on update on prior cases.
The Fun Factory located on Capitol Avenue, the old shoe factory building, that PUD plan was approved by City Council. That's all I have to report.
Ready to open business in 30 days?
We have not received any plans. I believe that they've been in consultation with the Building Regulations Division, and it's certainly some architectural plans that are going to be the major item there.
Okay. I did speak with city staff before we started this evening. I would like to remind everyone and those that might be watching, the city always has open positions for boards and commissions. Right now, this commission is down one alternate. So if anybody knows anybody that would be interested in serving the constituents of Jefferson City, does anybody know what ward?
I think we have a good representation across the wards, and so I think it's open for any ward.
Yes. So we'd like to encourage anyone in the community of Jefferson to come forward. I think the place to apply would be with the city clerk, correct? Do it online?
It's online and through the front desk here at City Hall.
Okay.
And there's volunteer application forms that people can fill out, and certainly if there's anyone that has any specific questions about service with either the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Board of Adjustment, Planning Division staff would be happy to give them an overview.
Come see Ian anytime is what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else from commission members tonight?
They collect applications, generally don't like moving forward with appointments unless there's a good number of people to be considered for that. And so if it's a very small pool, then we put the word out that there's applications that we're trying to find.
And for the record, I'd like to state that I'd let you know that my wife is not happy with us tonight because of Valentine's Day. So if she actually reads this, I can state that she was mentioned this evening. I appreciate everyone. I appreciate everyone coming this evening, even though it is Valentine's Day. If there's nothing else, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.